Hi everyone. So I'm back again today with another video on the Herods. I know I have a bit of a Herod obsession, but I really think and feel that the Herod family and Revelation 12 are key to understanding a lot of prophecy and revelation, and 100% linked to our ruling elite today. So Revelation 12 identifying King Herod the Great as the red dragon, which most modern futurist prophecy believers put down to being a spiritual being that we know as Satan. However, when we look at the depiction of the dragon in Revelation 12, it has 7 heads and it has crowns on its heads and horns, which all represent, as the beasts in Daniel do, powers, kingships, and it's an aristocratic family. Okay, so this is the sarcophagus of Herod the Great. It says here, near the mausoleum of King Herod the Great at the Herodium, 3 stone sarcophagi were discovered in fragments. 2 light-colored, 1 reddish, on display here. Now I know that the stone in Petra is it's called the Rose City, and that's because the stone is a reddish color. So it's possible that this is Herod's sarcophagus. It may have been made out of stone from Petra, being that he was half Nabatean. The reddish sarcophagus was decorated in an opulent but restrained fashion with rosettes, and this is featured a bit in my videos, and palmettes. It was found smashed into hundreds of pieces scattered about the area. We assume that even though Herod's name does not appear on it, the sarcophagus held the king's body and was destroyed by the Jewish rebels who vented their anger upon it. On Wikipedia, it says the location of Herod's tomb is documented by Josephus, who writes, and the body was carried 200 furlongs to the Herodium, where he had given order to be buried. Professor Ehud Netzer, an archaeologist from the Hebrew University, read the writings of Josephus and focused his research on the vicinity of the pool and its surroundings. An article in the New York Times states, Lower Herodium consists of the remains of a large palace, a race track, service quarters, and a monumental building whose function is still a mystery. Perhaps, says Ehud Netzer, who excavated the site, it is Herod's mausoleum. Next to it is a pool almost twice as large as modern Olympic-sized pools. On May 7, 2007, an Israeli team of archaeologists of Hebrew University led by Netzer announced they had discovered the tomb. The site is located at the exact location given by Josephus atop tunnels and water pools at a flattened desert site halfway up the hill to the Herodium, 12 kilometers south of Jerusalem. The tomb contained a broken sarcophagus but no remains of a body. So here we have Petra, originally known to its inhabitants as Rakhmu, Nabatean Rakhmo, is a historic and archaeological city in southern Jordan, famous for its rock-cut architecture and water conduit system. Petra is also called the Rose City because of the color of the sandstone from which it is carved. The city is one of the new 7 wonders of the world and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we can see here the color of the stone that the architecture is cut from. We go back to the tomb of Herod, or to Herod's Wikipedia page. Herod was born around 72 BC in Idumea, south of Judea. He was the second son of Antipater the Idumean, so he was an Edomite, a high-ranking official under Ethnarch Hyrcanus II, and Cypros, a Nabatean Arab princess from Petra in present-day Jordan. So Herod had a strong connection with the island of Rhodes, and he used a lot of Judean money to rebuild and start the Olympics there. He rebuilt a lot of buildings and the Temple of Zeus. And it says here Rhodes. Historically, Rhodes was famous for the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The medieval old town, the city of Rhodes, has been declared the World Heritage Site. The island has been known as Rhodos in Greek throughout its history, similar sounding Rhodon in ancient Greek was the word for the rose, while in modern Greek, the also similar sounding rhodi or rhoido refers to the pomegranate and was also called lindos. So we can see here the sarcophagus of Herod the Great, or what is believed to be the sarcophagus of Herod the Great, and it's in this rose pink limestone, reddish limestone, which would be from the region in Petra. So it says here the importance of Rhodes in the New Testament period is attested by the visit of Herod the Great to the island. Herod passed by Rhodes on his way to Brundisium in the 40s BC. After Antony's defeat at Actium in the 31 BC, Herod returned to Rhodes to profess his loyalty to Augustus. The emperor confirmed Herod's rule and honored him. Herod rebuilt the temple of Apollo Pythias on Rhodes. So I have an article here. It's written by Orit Peleg Barkat, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, from ResearchGate, and page 146, it has some information on the architecture of Herod in Judea. It says, this preference corresponds well with the new Roman imperial trend from the time of Augustus onward. There is a clear inclination for the richer Corinthian order, and about 2/3 of the capitals created in the empire are Corinthian or a variant of it, by Wilson Jones, 2003. Although the use of Doric columns becomes infrequent in Herod's construction projects, the Doric frieze continues to be in common use, appearing above Ionic or Corinthian columns and below Ionic or Corinthian cornices. In contrast to the plain metopes of Hellenistic friezes, Herodian metopes are carved with rosettes or discs, representing blocked out rosettes. The popularity of the Doric frieze goes beyond Herod's buildings and is typical of the architecture of early Roman Judea. The reason for this may lie in the current negative approach among Jews towards figurative art, as images of gods and mythological scenes were common on running friezes in Greco-Roman, Ionic, and Corinthian facades. It should be mentioned that a similar phenomenon can be observed in the Doric cornices of Hellenistic and early Roman Judea. Doric cornices with plain soffits that lack the matuli and guttae are typical of Hellenistic Judea and Transjordan, while under Herod's reign, Doric cornices appear less often. But when they do appear, they are always carved with a guttae or on their soffits. Example of Herodian Doric cornice carved with tuli were found, I don't know if I'm saying that right, matuli, were found at the foot of the southern wall of the Temple Mount. Other examples exist in the upper city of Jerusalem and in the so-called al-Ahmad cave, also in Jerusalem. Doric friezes with rosettes in the metopes, as well as Ionic friezes decorated with acanthus scrolls, both appear for the first time in Judea under Herod. So the first time they appear in Judea is under Herod, constituting a turning point in local architectural decor. Local architectural decoration during the Hellenistic period is rather simple and is characterized by plain surfaces and formal decorations on the moldings, with free carved motifs being almost absent. In contrast, under Herod, the carving of geometrical and floral design becomes rather common. The sudden appearance of floral motifs indeed points to foreign influence. However, the rather abstract and geometrical character of the floral motifs in relation to their Hellenistic and Roman prototypes suggests that local artists did not copy the foreign designs, but rather gave them a local interpretation. The presence of Doric frieze metopes decorated with carved rosettes allows us to examine the style and technique that characterized the work of artists employed by Herod to adorn palaces and public buildings. Comparing the rosettes on the Doric frieze from Palestra 101 in Masada with the rosettes on the Doric frieze found in Lower Herodium and attributed by Ehud Netzer to Herod's burial complex, which was erected at the palace prior to the construction of the mausoleum up the hill, we can see that two different schools of artists were responsible for the adornment of the two buildings. The rosettes in the Masada are carved on a uniform surface parallel to the background. It says, while in the Herodian, the rosettes are carved with curved petals slanting towards the background at a shallow angle. Similarly, carved rosettes are found in Jerusalem, sarcophagi, and tomb facades and seem to indicate the presence of Jerusalemite artists at the Herodian. The earliest Doric friezes decorated with rosettes adorn the famous tholos of Epidurus dated to the 4th century BC. In the middle of the 3rd century BC, friezes carved with rosettes and bucrani without triglyphs decorate the Ptolemaium and Arsenian at Samothrace. The Ptolemaic influence apparent in these buildings suggests an Alexandrian origin for this type of decoration. The difficulty in establishing this assertion lies in the insufficient finds from Alexandria itself. More parallels exist in Republican Italy, especially in the funerary sphere by Foster, 1998, but also on public edifices and more rarely on temples. It seems, therefore, reasonable to believe that the shift from the plain metopes to metopes carved with rosettes that occurred under Herod was due to Roman influence. Here it says Roman influence also brought stucco ceiling decorations to Judea and to nearby Nabatea in this period. Fragments of molded stucco found in Herodium, Masada, Jericho, Cyprus, Caliro, and Macareus enabled us to construct decorative ceilings in the coffer style in the various palaces of Herod. The wide-ranging repertoire of motifs points to rich compositions of geometrical fields of various sizes and shapes, rectangular, diamond, like triangular, circular. The frames that create the contour of these fields are made of either ovolo or Symantium profiles, while the framed fields themselves contain molded rosettes and other floral motifs. So if we have a look here on rosette designs Wikipedia, it says the rosette derives from the natural shape of the botanical rosette formed by leaves, obviously, and petals. The rosette design is used extensively in sculptural objects from antiquity appearing in Mesopotamia and the funeral steles or steles decoration in ancient Greece. The rosette was another important symbol of Ishtar, which had originally belonged to Inanna along with the star of Ishtar. So that's why sometimes Satan, the devil, is represented by a rose. It's because the rose and the star coincide as a symbol of Inanna or Ishtar. It was adopted later in Romanesque and Renaissance architecture and also common in the art of Central Asia, spreading as far as India, where it is used as a decorative motif in Greco-Buddhist art. One of the earliest appearances of the rosette in ancient art is in early 4th millennium, so BC. Another early Mediterranean occurrence of the rosette design derives from the Minoan, Crete, among other places, and the designs appear on the Phaistos disc recovered from the Eponymous archaeological site in southern Crete. So, the Greeks, this is a popular Greek symbol. So we've got these tri symbols here from Sumerian bulls with rosettes. Priest King Harappan artwork. So, this looks, this tri shape, which is very similar to the fleur-de-lis. 1, 2, 3. They're calling this a rosette, which is kind of like the Trinity symbol or the Mother, Father, Goddess symbol. Assyrian rosette on an ivory piece from Nimrod, Iraq Museum, Baghdad. So now these are starting to look a little bit more like the Herodian rosette here. That's a rosette around the door of the Erechtheion, Athens, Greece, around 421 to 405 BC. So I'm not saying that this symbol is purely a Herod symbol, but I'm just showing how they did like to use this symbol, and that obviously is an ancient symbol associated with Ishtar. So I'll show a coin from Rhodes later on, and on one side we have the sun god Helios on one side, the other side is a rose, a three-petaled rose. And I think perhaps with Herod's usage of this particular symbol, he was showing allegiance to his Hellenistic god worship of Ishtar, or the mother goddess, but he was doing it in a way where he wouldn't get in trouble in Judea because they weren't allowed to have images of gods. In the times of Israel, it says during already in his 60s and in the waning years of his life, Herod made his third and final journey to Rome in 12 BC, and the 192nd Olympiad. On his trip, Herod surpassed the lavish gift he had given various Greek cities across the eastern Mediterranean with the favors he bestowed upon the Elands, a donation not only common to all Greece but to all the habitable earth, as far as the glory of the Olympic Games reached. Josephus Flavius writes in the Jewish War, "For when Herod perceived that they were come to nothing for want of money, and that the only remains of ancient Greece were in a manner gone, he not only became one of the combatants in the return of the fifth year games, which in his sailing to Rome he happened to be present at, but he settled upon them revenues of money for perpetuity, insomuch that his memorial as a combatant there can never fail," Josephus recounts. While Josephus doesn't specify the precise nature of Herod's endowment to the Eleans, Rolla posits that the king must have had to pay for renovation and reconstruction at the ancient athletic site, as well as financing the opening ceremony, official sacrifices and banquets, and possibly the cost of functionaries and even the victors' statues. In return for the generosity, Herod was proclaimed president of the Olympic Games for life, a position possibly created especially for him. After his return from Rome, Herod reinforced Greco-Roman athletic culture to Judea on an unprecedented scale. Josephus writes that in Jewish antiquities that Herod appointed solemn games to be celebrated every fifth year in honor of Caesar, and built a theater at Jerusalem, as also a very great amphitheater in the plain outside the city. Though archaeological evidence of the later has never been found, Hebrew University's Joseph Patridge suggests it may have been constructed out of wood in the earlier, more modest Roman design. At his newfound seaport in Caesarea Maritima, named in honor of his patron Caesar Augustus, Herod constructed a theater arena, a hippodrome, remnant of which are visible today. Solomon Zetlin writes in The Rise and Fall of Judean State that Herod inaugurated the city in 9 BC with a great pomp and splendor, which included musical contests, athletic exercises, horse racing, and fights by gladiators with wild beasts. Herod also arranged that Olympic Games be held at 4-year intervals in the Judean port. Herod's legacy after his death in 4 BC was divided between Romans and Jews. His city Caesarea would eventually become the Roman capital of Syria, Palestina, and the region's largest city. For the Jews, Herod's embrace of Olympic Games in Greco-Roman culture would further stain a bloody memory. So here we have Herodias is mentioned 6 times in the New Testament, and Salome is mentioned twice. Flavius Josephus is our primary source about the background of both women. The Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke provide additional information. So what happened to Herodias and Salome? Who were Herodias and Salome in the Bible? So Flavius Josephus reports that Herodias should not have married Herod Antipas because she had formerly been the wife of Herod Antipas's brother Herod Philip, and he was still alive. She was the niece of both her former husband Herod Philip and her current husband Herod Antipas. So Herodias' current marriage to Herod Antipas was an incestuous one. Luke 3:1 says that Herod was the tetrarch of Galilee and Philip was the tetrarch of the region of Iturea and Trachonitis. In the Antiquities of the Jews, Flavius Josephus says that Herodias divorced her husband Philip for Herod, who was still married to his first wife. So Herod had been defeated in battle and was exiled by Aretas. Salome also reportedly decided to join Herod and Herodias in exile rather than be alone. This isn't true. She was actually married off to another Herod in Armenia Minor. Dexter reports that they went to Gaul initially and then to Lleida in Spain. As Salome was passing over a frozen river, the ice broke and she sank up to her neck and died. Not true. There's actually minted coins with Salome's image on them. Herod was defeated by Aretas. Afterwards, he was banished with Herodias to Lyon and deprived of his tetrarchy and everything by Caligula. At the instigation of Agrippa, the brother of Herodias, and Josephus relates, moreover, the head of the dancing daughter was cut off by means of ice. Not true. On her Wikipedia page, a few coins of portraits of Aristobulus and Salome have been found. So here's some of the coins here of Aristobulus. It says Josephus said Salome is mentioned as the stepdaughter of Herod Antipas in Josephus, the Antiquity of the Jews. Herodias was married to Herod, the son of Herod the Great, who was born of Mariamne, the daughter of Simon the priest, the high priest. I think this might be the relation to the Apostle Paul, actually, as he says that he was a relative of the Herods. So here we have, does Romans 16:11 reveal the Apostle Paul was related to Herod Agrippa? And it says, greet Herodian, my countrymen. Costobarus also and Saulus did themselves get together a multitude of wicked wretches, and this because they were of the royal family, and so they obtained favor among them because of their kindred to Agrippa. But still they used violence with the people and were very ready to plunder those that were weaker than themselves. So yeah, in Josephus, it says here that Salome was married to Philip, the son of Herod and tetrarch of Trachonitis, and as he died childless, Aristobulus, the son of Herod, the brother of Agrippa, married her, and they had 3 sons, Herod Agrippa and Aristobulus. Aristobulus of Chalcis was the son of Herod of Chalcis and his wife Mariamne. Herod of Chalcis, ruler of Chalcis in Iturea, was the grandson of Herod the Great. Through his father Aristobulus IV, Mariamne was a granddaughter of Herod the Great through her mother Olympias. Hence, Aristobulus was the great-grandson of Herod the Great on both sides of his family. Aristobulus was married to Salome after the death of her first husband Philip the Tetrarch. With her, Aristobulus had 3 sons, and I'm sure they had more daughters as well. He was a son of Herod of Chalcis, also known as Herod Polio, and this is where this Vespasian line comes in, as Vespasian's mother was Vespasiana Polo, and has a lot of similarities to this family. Vespasian's son having an affair with Bernice, the sister of Herod Agrippa. So from the Jewish library, we have Lyon is the capital of. So Rhodes, Rhone. Rhone comes from the word of rose-colored departments in East Central France. According to the medieval Jewish legend, one of the 3 boats loaded with Jewish captives taken during the siege of Jerusalem docked at Lyon. Herod Antipas, tetrarch of Galilee, was exiled to the city by Caligula in 39 current era or AD. Lyon seems to have had a Jewish population in both the 1st and 2nd centuries. Little more is known about Jews in Lyon until the beginning of the 9th century. However, when there was a large, prosperous, and powerful Jewish community in the city, the Jews owned slaves and also employed Christian laborers in their homes and in their commercial and agricultural enterprises. The original slave owners. So as I've said in other videos, we have the War of the Roses, known as at the time in the following centuries as the civil wars were the series of civil wars fought over control of the English throne, the House of Lancaster and the House of York. And here we have really similar symbol to that on the sarcophagus of Herod the Great, the white rose of the House of York, the red rose of the House of Lancaster, and the unified rose of both York and Lancaster in the House of Tudor or Henry Tudor. Let's have a look at this rose on the sarcophagus of Herod the Great and the House of Tudor. So we have the combined roses of the House of Tudor, Lancaster and York, and we have the rosette on the sarcophagus of Herod the Great. So the Lancaster family come from the Plantagenet family. The House of Plantagenet was a royal house which originated from the French country of Anjou. The name Plantagenet is used by modern historians to identify four distinct royal houses of the Angevins, who were also counts of Anjou, the main line of the Plantagenets. Following the loss of Anjou, the House of Lancaster and York, two of the Plantagenets' cadet branches. The family held the English throne from 1154 with the ascension of Henry II until 1485 with when Richard III died. England was transformed under the Plantagenets, although only partly intentionally. The Plantagenet kings were often forced to negotiate compromise such as Magna Carta. So the Angevins were a royal house of Anglo-French origin that ruled England and France in the 12th and early 13th centuries. Its monarchs were Henry II, Richard I, John, Henry II, and the Angevins descend from Geoffrey II, Count of Gâtinais, and Ermengarde of Anjou in 1060. This couple inherited via cognatic kinship the country of Anjou from an older line dating from 870 and a noble called Ingelga. The marriage of Count Geoffrey to Matilda, the only surviving legitimate child of Henry the First of England, was part of a struggle for power during the 10th and 11th centuries among the lords of Normandy, Brittany, Poitou, Blois, and Maine. Excuse my pronunciation. Now, Geoffrey was married to Matilda, and I believe Matilda was from Armenia. And that's exactly where the family of Salome went. So we also have another Herod that was banished to a similar region. The first wife of Archelaus was given by Josephus simply as Mariamne, perhaps Mariamne III, daughter of Aristobulus IV, whom he divorced to marry Glaphyra. She was the widow of Archelaus' brother Alexander. Though her second husband, Juba, king of Mauritania, was alive, this violation of the Mosaic law, along with Archelaus' continued cruelty, roused the ire of the Jews, who complained to Augustus. Archelaus fell into disrepute and was deposed in his 10th year of reign as ethnarch, being banished to Vienna, today Vienna in Gaul. So Samaria, Judea proper, and New Judea became the Roman province of Judea. So Vienna is a town in southeastern France, located 35 kilometers south of Lyon, at the confluence of the Guéry and the Rhone. So here we have the Rhone again, the Rhone being rose. So the name Rhone continues the Latin Rhodanus, named from the Greek Rhodanus in Greek Roman geography. The Gaulish name of the river was Rhodonus or Rotonus. So it's related to the word rose again. Before railroads and highways were developed, the Rhone was an important inland trade and transportation route connecting the cities of Arles, Avignon, Valence, Vienna, and Lyon to the Mediterranean ports of Fos-sur-Mer, Marseille, and Sète. traveling down the Rhone by barge would take 3 weeks. So here we have people banished from one of the main trading hubs of the Silk Road, Jerusalem, and we've got this big trading hub again happening here in Lyon, in this region of the Rhone. And we start asking questions why there's so much connection and occult New World Order doctrines coming out of Switzerland. Sion, the Swiss city that runs the Olympics, and set dramatically among a picture perfect lake, mountains, and hillside vineyards, this unassuming city offers a unique glimpse at how the modern games came to be. And in 1890s, when French-born Pierre de Coubertin set about reviving the ancient Greek sporting games, first recorded at Olympia in 776 BC, he thought about following classical precedent and giving his modern Olympias a single permanent location too. But instead of considering his own birthplace, Paris, or perhaps the world's most populated city at the time, London, as a potential permanent host city, he imagined staging his modern games in and around a small Swiss city he had fallen in love with, the shores of Lake Geneva. The Rhone is a major river in France and Switzerland, rising in the Alps and flowing west and south through Lake Geneva and southeast France before discharging into the Mediterranean Sea, the Gulf of Lyon at Arles near its mouth. The river divides into the Great Rhone and the Little Rhone. The resulting delta forms the Camargue region. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Charles Pierre de Freddy Baron de Coubertin. He was born into a French aristocratic family. Coubertin became an academic and studied a broad range of topics, most notably education and history. He graduated with a degree in law and public affairs from the Institute of Political Studies of Paris. So, it says here, family tradition held that the Friedi family had first arrived in France in the early 15th century, and the first recorded title of nobility granted to the family was given by Louis XI to an ancestor also named Pierre. But other branches of his family tree delve even further into French history, and the annals of both sides of his family included nobles of various stations, military leaders, and associates of kings and princes of France. So when we see the Angevin Empire, was a collection of territories held by the House of Plantagenet during the 12th and 13th centuries, when they ruled over the area covering roughly all of present-day England, half of France, and parts of Ireland and Wales. The influence and power of Angevin kings of England brought them into conflict with the kings of France of the House of Capet, whom they also owned feudal homage to their French possessions in a period of rivalry between the dynasties. So if we look at this map of France from 1180, we have the region of Anjou in red, and right on the border here between Switzerland, we have Lyon. So basically, I'm just highlighting it here in blue now. It's on the red line, the border of France, and we have Lake Geneva up here. Lake Geneva up here, the source of the Rhone River that runs down through Lyon and down into the Gulf of Lyon. So the other river that runs through Anjou is the Seine. So in France, we have the House of Capet, and the House of Capet ruled the Kingdom of France from 987 to 1328. It was the most senior line of Capetan dynasty, itself a derivative dynasty from the Robertines and the Carlings, the Carolingian dynasty. So it says here, the first Capetan monarch was Hugh Capet, a Frankish nobleman from Paris, who, following the death of Louis V, the last Carolingian king, secure the throne of France by election. Hugh was the descendant of Charlemagne through his son Pepin of Italy, and through them claimed descent from Constantine the Great. Now, I've done some looking into Constantine and believe he's related to the Herod family. So Louis married twice more before finally having a son, Philip. Philip II started to break the power of the Plantagenets, the family of Eleanor and Henry II in France. Louis the Ninth, Saint Louis, though he expended much money and effort on the Crusades only for it to go to waste, as a French king he was admired for his austerity, strength, bravery, justice, and his devotion to France. Dynastically, he established two notable Capetian houses, the House of Anjou, which he created by bestowing the country of Anjou upon his brother Charles I, and the House of Bourbon, which he established by bestowing Clement on his son Robert. So the Angevins were established by this Capitan family. So Lugdunum was an important Roman city in Gaul that was located where Lyon stands today. It was founded in 43 BC under a policy of establishing settlements in new conquered areas with the aims of ensuring the stability of those areas and rewarding retired veteran soldiers with the land and rights. The settlement initiatives were established by Julius Caesar and included the cities of Vienne, Novidunum, Switzerland. Interesting. Novidunum, a colonial. Julia Equestris was a Roman era settlement in what is now Nyon in the canton of Vaud in Switzerland, and Augusta Rurica, a Roman archaeological site and open-air museum in Switzerland, located on the south bank of the Rhine River, about 20 kilometers of Basel, near the villages of Augst and Kaiserrath. It is the site of the oldest known Roman colony on the Rhine. The indigenous people of this area were the Allobroges. So how interesting is this? So Vienna was where Herod Archelaus was banished, and it was Herod Antipas who was banished to Lyon or Lugdunum. So two Herods in this region. Lucius Manatus Plancus, a former officer under Julius Caesar and later proconsul of Gaul, Chevelu, is credited with founding the city. The true date of the founding is debated by historians. So we know that Hadrian was a friend of Carax, who was a Herod. He was the priest in the temple of Asclepius in Pergamon. It says, thanks to the location and influence, the city grew and rapidly increased in wealth. Aqueducts were likely built between 20 and 10 BC. The large number of monuments were also built during the same period. The oldest theatre in the Three Gauls, which had about 4,500 seats, was opened in Lyon between 16 and 14 BC by decree of Augustus. The theatre was later expanded under Hadrian to include around 10,700 seats. So here we have book European Royal Bloodlines of the American Presidents. And here it says by Descartes, any community that gets its laugh by pretending to be idiots will eventually be flattered by actual idiots who mistakenly believe that they're in good company. It says, it is interesting to note that all 45 American presidents have carried European royal bloodlines into office. Even one of the 45 American presidents has been genetic descendants from just one person, Charlemagne, the 8th century king of the Franks. According to Harold Brooks Baker of the Burke's Peerage, the Bible of aristocratic genealogy based in London, every presidential election in America has been won by the candidate with British and French royal genes. America declared its independence from the European monarchies in 1776. How is it possible that every single president has descended from European monarchs? If presidents are democratically elected, as we are told, what are the odds that we would always choose members of British and French royal bloodlines to lead us? So I'm not going to name the presidents, but I will name the family. The Capetian monarch was Hugh Capet, a Frankish nobleman from the Ile de France who, following the death of Louis V, the last Carolingian king, secured the throne of France by election. Hugh was a descendant of Charlemagne. All US presidents are related. 12-year-old girl discovers that all but one president are directly related to each other. I'm sure he'll be related on some other way. In her thorough research, which involved over 500,000 names through history, her aim was to find the ancestry of all US presidents and see if there was a presidential atom that connected all of them. To everyone's surprise, she discovered that 42 of the 43 US presidents traced back to a single person, John Lackland Plantagenet, King of England. He was the brother of King Richard the Lionheart, Crusader, inside Madonna's family relationship to Celine Dion. So many celebrities are related in one way or another, and some distantly so. Madonna is another celeb that has a pretty important family tree, even so far as tracing back to royalty. The singer has connections to French Canadian ancestry through her mother's side, which leads as far back to the bloodline of royalty. According to Hello, Madonna is the descendant of the 17th century couple Madeleine Ernard and Zachary Coultier, who were part of the high society in Canada. This ancestry has provided Madonna with some pretty amazing family ties, being that ninth cousin of Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla Parker Bowles. Madonna isn't the only Atlantic relative of the future princess consort of England, as Ernard and Coultier's bloodline also connects the singer to Canadian pop star Celine Dion, as well as darling Angelina Jolie. So also related to this family, this French-Canadian family, is Hillary Rodham Clinton. So I just want to add in here to the Rose of Rhodes, and in Rhode Island, Hallis, Rose of Rhodes. Let's have a look at this. Rhode Island Hallius, or Hallis, Rose of Rhodes. So it looks like a fleur-de-lis. It's all over Rhodes, the island. We have the coin of Rhodes. So here's the Colossus of Rhodes, the sun god on here, Zeus. And we have this rose that looks like a fleur-de-lis. Now, I have that theory of Herod, that his name comes from being the hero of Rhodes, because so Heros is the Greek word for hero, Heros, hero, and Rhodes, as in Herod, the hero of Rhodes, because he saved their city and rebuilt their temples and started an Olympic Games. So he was the king of Judea, the beginning of the Herodian kingdom. The heads of the dragon. There was many Herod kings, not just Herod the Great. And he was the son of Antipater the Idumean. So Antipater the Idumean was his father. He was the founder of the Herodian dynasty. But nobody knows where Herod got his name Herod from. Here we have this tomb with the rose that looks like the rose of Lancaster and York. So the amazing name Herod. So we have here the etymology. None of the reliable sources has anything to say about the etymology of the name Herod. So it's safe to say that no consensus about it exists in academic circles. But that also means the folklore can have an unrestrained go at it. Some purpose that the name Herod contains the words meaning hero and warrior, meaning ode. That would render the name Herod meaning heroes, ode, independently of whether the original designer of the name had that meaning in mind. However, the Herod family originated in Idumea, which is the Greek and Latin translation of the original name Edom. That means that the Herodians were Jews, or weren't even Jews or Israelites, but descendants of Esau, the brother of Israel's patriarch Jacob. So they weren't only descendants of Esau, though they were descendants of the Nabateans. He was half Nabatean, which go back to Babylonian. The territory of Edom was to the south of Israel, close to the Negev desert. A large town a bit of the west of Edom is named Arad, indicative of the possible kinship between the name Herod and the Semitic root. Now, that could be true, but I also have another theory that it's the hero of Rhodes, Herod. So we have this coin from Rhodes, which is a rose, but looks a lot like a fleur-de-lis. More coins, fleur-de-lis, my opinion. Another one that looks more like a fleur-de-lis, which is supposed to be a lily. The Rosicrucians, and we have this rose and cross. So Rosicrucianism is a spiritual and cultural movement that arose in early modern Europe in the early 17th century after the publication of several texts announcing the world as the new esoteric order. So this Rosicrucian order is linked to the Georgia Guidestones, the RCC, or so yeah, they were supposed to have been erected in 1979 by R.C. Christian, and some people say it could be Roman Catholic Christian, or it could be related to the Rosicrucians. The Christian Rosencreutz, legendary, possibly allegorical founder of the Rosicrucian order. He is presented in 3 manifestos that were published early in the 17th century. Now that's too late for the Rosicrucians. Christian Rosencreutz was a medieval German aristocrat, orphaned at the age of 4 and raised in a monastery where he studied for 12 years. Okay, so that's who they say started the Rosicrucians, but in one of my other videos, we discovered that it was someone who, this German guy who was linked to the occult or Kabbalism. No verifiable account of Christian Rosencreutz as a real person exists, while support for this real personage is generally limited to myths and legends. We've got the rose cross here. So Johann Valentin André and the Legend of the Rosicrucians. On August 17, 1586, German theologian and author Johannes Valentinus André was born. He claimed to be the author of the Christiani Rosenkreuz Anno 1459, one of the 3 founding works of Rosicrucianism, a philosophical secret society said to have been founded in late medieval Germany by Christian Rosenkreuz. Rosicrucianism holds a doctrine of theology built on esoteric truths of the ancient past, which, concealed from average man, provide insight into nature and physical universe and spiritual realm. So André was a prominent member of the Protestant utopian movement, which began in Germany and spread across Northern Europe and to Britain under the mentorship of Samuel Hartlib and John Amos Comenius. Samuel Hartlib was a Polish-born English educational and agricultural reformer of German-Polish origin. The focus of this movement was the need for education and encouragement of sciences as the key to national prosperity. Now we know where that led us today, don't we? Right down the road of Darwin and atheism and the religion of science. But like many vaguely religious Renaissance movements at this time, the scientific ideas being promoted were often tinged with Hermeticism, occultism, and Neoplatonic concepts. So Andreas was born at Harrenberg, Wittenberg, and so he wrote the first version of the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosencreutz. He visited Dillingen, a bastion of the Jesuits, whom he regarded as the Antichrist. So we have the rose of Luther and Protestantism, the rose with the cross. The Luther rose or Luther seal is a widely recognized symbol for Lutheranism. It was the seal that was designed for Martin Luther at behest of John Frederick of Saxony. Like, why did they want Protestantism? And, I'm not saying that it's entirely bad or people were bad yet, or that the Catholic Church was good, but I feel like they needed to create this Hegelian dialectic within religion again. Like they already had a sort of Hegelian dialectic between the Muslims and the Christians, the Roman Catholic Christians. So they have these two sides that they can use to battle off against each other to change nations and people and politics. And they needed to create the same thing within the Christian religion. And one of the main proponents of Protestantism was King Henry VIII. And, like, was it just because he wanted to change his wives so frequently that he used the Protestant Reformation to do this? Or, was it because there was an agenda behind Protestantism and, as I said, this Hegelian dialectic between Protestantism and the Roman Catholic Church, which we saw, really manifest, create a lot of wars through Europe. And, we look at Northern Ireland, there was a lot of conflict between Protestant and Catholic in the nations, which they want to create chaos, because out of chaos comes order. Henry brought radical changes to the Constitution of England, expanding royal power and ushering in the theory of divine right of kings in opposition to papal supremacy. The Pope basically is a king and priest in one, and Henry became the king and priest of the United Kingdom, or England at that time, the UK, Britain, and he became the head of the Anglican Protestant Church as well as the King of England. The Pope, he was basically the Pope of Protestantism, and that's what the King of England really stands for. He's the head of the Anglican Church, the King of the Commonwealth. He was from the House of Tudor, and look at this rose here, just like the rose of Martin Luther without the cross in the middle of the rose. Now, the rose makes me think of the Rose line. The Paris Meridian is a meridian line running through Paris Observatory in Paris, France. We have Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. The chapel was founded by William Sinclair, 1st Earl of Caithness, the Sinclair family. And this Rosslyn Chapel is said to be the foundation of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. I have always found it quite fascinating, the subject of the origins of Freemasonry, which until recently I had never heard adequately explained. The theory that stonemasons in Scotland had formed an underground and secret society with its own password and ceremonies seemed improbable, as there was simply no reason for them to go to such a length to conceal their craft. The fact that these ceremonies were all based around the Temple of Salome in Jerusalem, which likely none of them had ever visited, reinforced my view that there must be some better explanation. So, as the Knights Templar were the only group, even to this day, to have excavated the Temple of Solomon, it always put at the back of my mind the fact that there could be a link between the order and the genesis of Freemasonry. The need for secrecy to avoid being burned as a heretic would have been a strong motivation for going underground. Reading Sanford Holt's book Sworn in Secrecy last year and The Lesser Extent Born in Blood by John Robinson convinced me that this was indeed the case, and that the argument that has raged since Chevalier Ramsay's motif Templar claim in 1739 was now effectively settled. The acceptance of the Templar version of events drew me back to Rosslyn Chapel, that beautiful building close to Edinburgh that has been linked with both the Freemasons and Templars by Hollywood writers and theorists alike. But there are facts which do support Templar Masonic links. They have just been a little harder to find. The fact that the Earls of Rosslyn were shown to be hereditary Grand Masters of Scottish Freemasonry prior to the official formation in 1736 was a crystal clear indication of the chapel's link to Freemasonry. Hugh de Paynes, the first Grand Master of Knights Templar, fought with Henry Sinclair, Baron of Rosslyn, in the First Crusade and visited Scotland in 1128. He sought grants of land to support the order, and first grant of land given to the Templars in the UK was less than 4 miles away from Rosslyn. The links to the Templars were also there. So, this all ties back again to France and the Crusades for the Holy Land to take back Jerusalem again. And who put out that decree? It was Pope Urban financed by the Pielioni Jewish bankers of Rome. Seems to be a desire to take this land back that's been going ever since it fell in 70 AD. Some people believe that powerful but invisible forces channel energy and spiritual power across the land, an energy which can be felt by those in the know, an energy which links places of spiritual importance across the country, joining them together with spiritual power. These are called ley lines, and those who believe in them think that you can map them like any other feature of the earth. Some claim that at least one such invisible line of energy passes straight through the side of Rosslyn Chapel itself. In fact, they say that is why the chapel is built where it is. Some claim to feel this line's energy in the chapel itself. They believe the Rosslyn Chapel's existence and many of its important features are linked to these lines of spiritual power. Some have further claimed that the particular line of energy which passes through Rosslyn is called the Rose line. Furthermore, they suggest that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was known as Mary of the Rose, and so the chapel's name is linked with the name of Mary and her descendants. Indeed, such people say the name of the chapel suggests that the Rose line, or descendants of Mary, is what the chapel is about. In more recent times, a fictional story associated with the Rose line with Mary Magdalene rather than Virgin Mary. So I just want to add an interesting fact here. On Wikipedia, we've got Mariamne is a name frequently used by the Herodian royal house. In some editions of Josephus's work, M is doubled for Mariamne. In later copies of those editions, the spelling was dismantled. In Hebrew, Mariamne is known as Miriam, as in the biblical name. Mariamne is the Hellenized version of the Hebrew, as Koine Greek was a common language in the late Hasmonean era in Judea, where both Mariamnes lived. For Gnostic readers, Mariamne is also recognized as possibly being Mary Magdalene. A very interesting fact is that the Herod claim to the royal throne of Judea was through Herod the Great's wife, Mariamne, who was related to the Judean royal family. So this brings me to the Da Vinci Code, the Priory de Sion, translated as Priory of Zion, is a fraternal organization founded in France and dissolved in 1956 by Pierre Plantard. Is a failed attempt to create a prestigious neo-chivalric order in the 1960s. Plantard began claiming that his self-styled order was the latest front for a secret society founded by crusading knights Godfrey of Bouillon on Mount Zion in the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099 under the guise of the historical monastic order of the Abbey of Our Lady of Mount Zion. As a framework for this grandiose assertion of being both the great monarch prophesied by Nostradamus and a Merovingian pretender, Plantard further claimed the Priory of Zion was engaged in centuries-long benevolent conspiracies to install a secret bloodline of the Merovingian dynasty on the thrones of France and the rest of Europe. To Plantard's surprise, all of his claims were fused with a notion of the Jesus bloodline and popularized by the authors of the 1982 speculative non-fiction book The Holy Blood and Holy Grail, whose conclusion would later be borrowed by Dan Brown and his 2003 mystery thriller novel The Da Vinci Code. So it's interesting that the symbol of this Priory of Zion is this fleur-de-lis, the rose of the island of Rhodes. The fleur-de-lis is a common heraldic charge in the stylized shape of a lily, so they say. Okay, design still represents France and the House of Bourbon. So we're going back to the House of Bourbon and the Capetian family. So the House of Bourbon and Anjou were started by the Capetans. And as I said, the House of Anjou started the Plantagenets and the Lancasters, the Yorks, and the Tudors. So this same family using this fleur-de-lis says the old fleur-de-lis, especially the ones found in the first king's scepters, have a lot less in common with ordinary lilies than the flower called flambas in Occitan, or irises, from which the name of our own fleur-de-lis may derive. The lily has always been a symbol of fertility and purity, and in Christianity it symbolizes immaculate conception. So all of these kings are using this fleur-de-lis. So the fleur-de-lis pattern is clearly depicted in an illustration of Emperor Nicephorus' Phocas welcome ceremony in Constantinople in 963 AD, included in Synopsis Historian dated 1070. The fleur-de-lis pattern can also be found on Ionic capital of Panagia Scrippo Church dated 870. So we have the use of the fleur-de-lis here, 800, 900 AD. The official story for the French use of the fleur-de-lis is said to come from an iris. So it says here, let's start with the name. What is in a name after all? An iris by another name would look pretty much like a lily. And this has led to the confusion between the genus since French King Louis VI 1108 and 1137, or the 7th, 1137 to 1180, won a battle on a swampy field blooming with iris and decided to choose this flower as his emblem. The graphic design created was initially known as the fleur-de-lis, but was soon truncated to fleur-de-lis, French for lily, confused. We all are. So, I mean, if it was the fleur-de-lis, it seems here that this story of a battle in a field of irises is just a contrived story, or like a legend, basically. And I can see how it may have got confused with becoming the fleur-de-lis instead of the fleur-de-lis, Louis the King, of this particular family line, because it was after Louis V the French throne was taken over by this Capitan family of the Angevins. We have this use of this fleur-de-lis symbol hundreds of years before these kings adopted this symbol. The symbol was obviously being used way before this, but the French kings started using it in King Louis VI or King Louis VII's time period. So we have the fleur-de-lis here on this person from Constantinople. Nicephorus II Phocas was a Byzantine emperor from 963 to 969. His career, not uniformly successful in matter of statecraft of war, nonetheless greatly contributed to the resurgence of the Byzantine Empire during the 10th century. In the east, Nicephorus completed the conquest of Cilicia and retook the island of Crete and Cyprus, opening the path for subsequent Byzantine incursions reaching as far as Upper Mesopotamia, the Levant. Nicephorus was born around 912. From his paternal side, he belonged to the Phocas family, which had produced several distinguished generals, including Nicephorus' father, Bards Phocas, brother Leo Phocas, and grandfather Nicephorus Phocas the Elder, who had all served as commanders in the field army. From his maternal side, he belonged to the Melanoi, a powerful Anatolian Greek family which had settled in Cappadocia. Cilicia is in Turkey, one of the regions that was ruled by Herods. Bernice of Cilicia, also known as Julia Bernice, she was a Jewish client queen of the Roman Empire during the second half of the 1st century. Bernice was a member of the Herodian dynasty. So she's the one that had the affair with Titus, the son of Vespasian. Joan of Taranto was Queen of Armenia by marriage to Ocean, King of Armenia, as daughter of Philip I, Prince of Taranto. She was a member of the Capitan House of Anjou. Joan was daughter of Philip I, Prince of Taranto, and his first wife, Thamar Angelina Comnene. So she had Marie of Korikos, Queen of Consort of Armenia. through marriage to kings Constantine III and Constantine IV. After her second husband's death in 1373, she served as the penultimate ruler of Armenia, Kingdom of Cilicia. The Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia, also known as Cilician Armenia, Lesser Armenia, Little Armenia, or New Armenia, formerly known as the Armenian Principality of Cilicia. And I've said this before, but the legend that the Georgian royal Bagratoni dynasty were of a Hebrew origin and descended from David dates back to the family's appearance on the Georgian soil in the later half of the 8th century. As the Bagratid power grew, the claim morphed into an officially endorsed paradigm enshrined in medieval history literature such as the 11th century chronicle of Sambat Davidus Z, and formed the basis of the dynasty's political ideology for the duration of the millennium. Long ascendancy in Georgia, the proposed Davidic descent allowed the Bagrationi to claim kinship with Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary and rest their legitimacy on the biblical archetype of the God-anointed royalty. The legend of the Bagrationi, Hebrew or descent, is given no credence by modern mainstream scholarship. The family's origin is disputed, but the view formulated by the historian that the Georgian dynasty descended from a refuge prince of the Armenian house of the Bagratuni prevails. So I believe that the same story about the House of Windsor and the British royal family comes from here. See, the legend became well known through the feature of the 45th chapter of the Treatise de Administrando Imperio, written in 950 by the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus, who the claim reached through the Caucasians, serving at the imperial court of Constantinople. According to Constantine, Georgians believed they were the scions of Uriah's wife Bathsheba, with whom King David committed adultery and who had children by him. Thus they claimed to have been related to the Virgin Mary, inasmuch as she was also descended from David. So this line of this Armenian royal family marries into the Anjou family during the Crusades, and they then go on to sit on the throne of England. Now, I think personally that this is a story that would be made up by the Herod line that ruled Armenia, Lesser Armenia, and what is now Georgia. It says they did not explicitly apply a Davidic origin to their Armenian cousins, although the Armenians subsequently adopted the Georgians' innovation as their own. Now, as I said, these royal lines go back to the Herods and the throne of Israel or Judea, and they married into the royal family of Israel and Judea at that time. King Herod the Great married Mariamne, who was the daughter of that family, and they were related to the high priests of Judea. Because that particular line of Herods that went to rule Armenia were from the lineage of Herod's second wife, Mariamne, who was related to the Judean royal family.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about dragons because, as a lot of you pointed out in my last video, this depiction here on screen, we're being told it's a salamander. It might actually be a dragon, so should be interesting. Let's get into it. Now, as I started reading a lot of your guys' comments in the last video, I tend to agree with what you were pointing out, and this isn't a salamander as we're being told, but it's actually a dragon. And just as a bit of a refresher, we're told that this crowned salamander is linked to this King of France, King Francis I, in the early to mid 1500s. And I wasn't really even looking at it. I was kind of more focused on other aspects of the video, but once I started studying it, you guys are correct. And one of the dead giveaways is actually the claws on, this quote salamander, because salamanders do not have claws actually. but lizards have scales and claws. So it's definitely not a salamander in the neck, and you could point to many things. So why are they being deceptive about this? Because there's an entire backstory for why this king chose a salamander, and there are many publications that will back that narrative, but you can clearly see that it's not a salamander, but they're telling us it is. So that's very intriguing. So I wanted to look into that a bit more, and also the crown that is above the dragon. This crown, it's actually a prince's crown, and that is another interesting aspect for me, because there are crowns associated with a king that look different. So this king is being depicted with a prince's crown. So I thought that was interesting, and when you kind of look into that a bit, you will find the official narrative does say that this king, Francis I, is often depicted with a prince's crown, because apparently it represents his status as the Dauphin of France, the heir apparent to the throne before he became king. So I guess people continued to depict him with this prince's crown. That's, just very interesting. So I started looking into just this crowned salamander, which we now know to be a dragon. I wanted to see where else it popped up, and my search led me to Parliament Hill in Ottawa, Ontario. And this big structure here, front and center, this is actually referred to as the center block, and this is a library actually now. And there was a great fire, we're told, I think in 1916 or 17, and there was a structure here before that looked very similar to this, and we're told they decided to just tear it all down after the fire and build another structure that looks eerily similar to the previous one. But I came across an article talking about the fleur-de-lis, the salamander, and the thistle associated with Parliament Hill, Parliament's royal symbols. So as I started looking into this article, sure enough, there's, I guess, a lot of fleur-de-lis depictions associated with Parliament Hill. It appears all over Parliament Hill as a symbol. And even this spandrel in the center block building, there is a shield with a fleur-de-lis from the arms of France, and it's linked to Francis or Francois I again. So you got the 3 fleur-de-lis, and again a different type of crown here, and 2 faces, but I recognize the 3 fleur-de-lis pattern in this coat of arms. And again, that's also depicted on that building in New York City, the Alwyn Court. So very interesting. But what else can be found on Parliament Hill is a crowned salamander, which we now know to be a dragon. And the salamander, we're being told it's an emblem of Francis I or Francois I, and it appears on a fireback from the center block. So I didn't even know there were all these connections to Francis I or Francois I on Parliament Hill. And again, the crown does look a bit different to me, so that is interesting. Now, I wanted to look into fleur-de-lis a bit, and of course, the fleur-de-lis is the official emblem of the kings of France since the 12th century. That makes sense, but they're also linked to the Medici family and Florence in particular. And of course, the Medici family is linked to Florence. But when I started looking into this, and they have a stylized fleur-de-lis linked to them, I noticed that on this same building in New York, once again, Alwyn Court, there does appear to be this stylized fleur-de-lis that is scattered throughout the facade of that building. And apparently this particular type of fleur-de-lis was the flag of the Republic of Florence from 1250 to 1532. And I guess the flag is still used today as a symbol of Florence, and to some degree previously the Medici family. So it just, to me, it seems like it's very similar to this particular flag of Florence, this what's being shown here on the facade of that building from New York. And this building is insane. The amount of decorative motifs on the facade, it is nuts, and it's pretty much spans all 12 floors of that building. But once again, here's just that fleur-de-lis on a crown, the grand ducal crown of Cosimo I. So just another interesting element. And that building, once again in New York, there's several of these crowned, well, which I guess they're crowned dragons. Many of these faces that we see on a lot of the buildings we're kind of questioning. And these particular faces looks like a man, and here's a woman over here, and some lions over here, and some type of grotesque. This building, you could just study this building for hours. And there are several actually of these crowned dragons. And here's another woman represented with these cornucopias. The amount of effort that must have been put into everything we're seeing on the facade is unreal. There's also what appears to be a bearded man here as well. So just a lot going on, and this is just 4 or 5 of the floors here, and I wanted to show one more face, and looks like some type of green man, but there's a lot of crowns actually depicted on the facade of this structure. So a lot to look into. Now, this crowned salamander or dragon, it's actually depicted on a lot of coat of arms associated with regions of France, and these are just a few of them up top. And I'm just showing, this is, I think, a port city, but it's shown in publications, and this is another township or commune, and this is the area in France, but they're all depicting this crowned, what really is a dragon, but we're being told it's a salamander. But there must be a reason for the deception, but it shows up in a lot of places. And there's even something called a lindworm, which is a giant serpent-like monster from European folklore, and it goes by a few different spellings. But you can also see, this giant serpent-like monster breathing fire as well, and it's also on these coats of arms. And an archaeologist from the 1800s has described it as basically a dragon without wings. So there's a lot of depictions of things showing up on coats of arms that may be dragons or claim to be dragons, and I just wanted to mention a few of those. And something else here I wanted to mention, there's another crowned serpent that is associated with, I think, Milan in Italy, and it's linked to this family, the mythical origins of this Visconti coat of arms, and it shows this, what looks like a serpent, and it's a crowned serpent, and it seems to be swallowing somebody, and it's also on the Alfa Romeo logo, but it's this referred to as the Bestioni. It's a snake symbol often associated with Milan, wearing a crown, and it represents this powerful ruling family, this dynasty in Milan, who use this snake as their symbol. So just a lot going on with crowned serpents and dragons, and here are some depictions of it in and around Milan, Italy. And I guess the former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, one of his residences, he's got this crowned serpent depicted on his lawn, apparently. So just a lot of interesting things seem to go back to Italy, France, and they're deceiving us about this salamander dragon issue, and I think I'm gonna have to dig into that a bit further, as well as the types of crowns that are showing up. But a lot of interesting rabbit holes to go down, but I think that's about all I got for you for today. I want to give a big shout out and thanks to my channel members. Thank you for all your help and support, greatly appreciated, as well as my patrons. Thank you as well for everything that you do. It's also greatly appreciated. So with that being said, until next time, take care.
Now, I've done research in my past videos about the seat of Satan being in Pergamon. It says Revelation 2:13, why does Jesus say that Satan's throne is in Pergamon? We have some answers here, which is really interesting. The 7 churches of Revelation 1 and 3 were located in and surrounded the capital city of Asia Minor, the seat of Satan in Pergamus. The seat of Satan was a reference to the center of idolatry, as Pergamus practiced sun worship, which originated from Babylonian idolatry, and their priests used the same vestments and title of pontiff. Their people were called the temple keepers of Asia. They had several gods, the chief of which was Zeus. The last leader of Pergamon gifted his title of Pontifex Maximus to Rome in 133 BC. The rulers and emperors of Rome used the title until 382 AD when Emperor Gratian refused it as being unchristian. But it is interesting to note that it is still used today by the Pope. Excerpts from Studies in Revelation by Hampton Keithley III in 1997, it says Pergamon was very wealthy, the center of emperor worship, with many temples devoted to idolatry. This was the place where Satan's throne is. Revelation 2:13. The phrase has been applied to the complex of pagan cults at Zeus, Athena, Dionysus, Asclepius, established by the Attalid kings, that of Asclepius Soter, the savior healer, being of special importance. These cults are illustrative of the religious history of Pergamon, but Satan's throne could be an allusion to emperor worship. This is where the worship of the divine emperor had been made the touchstone of civic loyalty under Domitian. Here was a magnificent temple of Asclepius, a pagan god whose idol was the form of a serpent. The inhabitants were known as the chief temple keepers of Asia. When the cult of the magicians driven out of Babylon, they found even in Pergamon. The title of the magician high priest was chief bridge builder. In Pontifex Maximus, the title now used by the Pope. This title goes all the way back to Babylon and the beginning of the mother-child cult under Nimrod and Genesis 10 and his wife Semiramis. Later, Julius Caesar was elected Pontifex Maximus when he became emperor, became the supreme civil and religious ruler and head of Rome, politically and religiously, with all the power and functions of the Babylonian pontiff, source message to Pergamon. Like Ephesus, it boasted on its coins and inscriptions to be temple keeper, and like other Asiatic Greeks, we may be certain that the Pergamons were devoted to a sensuous and licentious worship. The tutelary deity of Pergamon was Asclepius, the god of healing. In his honor, a living serpent was kept and fed in the temple, while the serpent worship was so marked a character of the place that we find this reptile engraved on many of its coins. The seven churches of Asia had to be strong and fight and resist and remain faithful to Christ. So the Pergamon inscription on white stone, the people of Pergamon were known as the temple keepers of Asia. The city had 3 temples dedicated to the worship of the Roman emperor, another for the goddess Athena, and the great altar of Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. Many scholars believe this altar is the throne of Satan, mentioned in the book of Revelation. That word throne was used in a personal private residence, and it was a chair for the lord of the house. The master of the house, says Renner. The very fact that Jesus would use this word means that Satan felt at home here. He sat on a throne there. It was his territory. He was a master of that house. The city also had a healing center called the Asclepiad, built in honor of Asclepius, the Greek serpent god. In the 1st century, this was a cross between a hospital and a health spa where patients could get everything from a mud bath to a major surgery. Even the emperors came all the way from Rome to be treated here, but this was no ordinary doctor's visit. So Augustus I of Rome, in history to combine the novel position of emperor with that of Pontifex Maximus, recalled in his Res Gestae, by the passage of new laws I restore many traditions of our ancestors which were then falling into disuse, and I myself set precedent in many things for posterity to imitate. 59. Augustus' words capture antique Roman society well. Their conservatism and innovation proved a winning combination. Similarly, the earliest pope in history to have himself presented as Pontifex Maximus understood the synergy of old and new joined together, and the necessity to have the innovative use of this title embedded or anchored in tradition in order for it to meet with approval from the various groups in society. Thus, the title Pontifex Maximus, as appropriated by popes of the past, was anchored in the tradition of imperial Roman titulature. So, of course, Christ didn't appoint Peter to be Pontifex Maximus, and of course, the early church fathers spoke of the Pontifex Maximus in such derogatory paganistic ways, because when the early fathers were writing, the Pontifex Maximus was head of the Roman pagan religion, and the Roman Empire itself was pagan. So any student of Roman history knows the Pontifex Maximus was an imperial office usually held by the emperor himself, which made one chief priest of the Roman state cult source. Excerpts from the title Pontifex Maximus. The papal title Pontifex Maximus can be traced back in different forms to the ancient Chaldean times when Medo-Persia conquered Babylon. The Babylonian religion was maintained, but after the revolt of the priesthood, the priests of Babylon were driven out of Medo-Persia and established themselves in Pergamon, taking with them their titles and vestures. The last pontiff king of Pergamon was Attalus III, who bequeathed his title to the Emperor of Rome in 133 BC. In the 4th century AD, Christian Emperor Gratian refused the title, and in the year 431 AD, the title was taken over by Damascus, Bishop of Rome. Damascus. See, this is where the Sanhedrin went. The last king of Pergamon, Attalus III, bequeathed the territory and treasure of Pergamon to Rome to avoid a civil war. Thereafter, Pergamon became a province of Rome source. And we have the Chaldeans, who were originally kicked out of Rome for telling fortunes, the Chaldeans from Babylon, the magicians. We have the Asclepian in Pergamon, in Turkey, today's Turkey, and further enhancements were made to the healing center by Roman emperors, including Hadrian in 1107 to 138 AD, who supported and financed building works at the Asclepian. He is thought to have visited Pergamon during his travels through Asia Minor in 123 AD. So remains of an inscribed marble Clypeus shield on the broken tympanum of the east pediment of the north hall of the propylon, the monumental gateway of the Pergamon Asclepion. The inscription is a dedication by Ullius Claudius Carax of Pergamon, circa 115 after 147 AD, who was the priest at the sanctuary and financed the building of the propylon. So Claudius Carax, so he was the priest here in Pergamon in that time period that Hadrian came along. Claudius Carax of Pergamon was a Roman citizen, military commander, politician, priest, philosopher, historian during his reigns of emperors Hadrian and Antonius Pius. His full name may have been Aulus Julius Tiberius Claudius Carax. He was known to scholars for centuries simply as Carax of Pergamon. His maternal grandfather was Gaius Julius Quadratus Bassus, a Romanized Galatian born in Pergamum. He was the legate of Judea. He was married to Julia Iotapa, also known as Julia of Cilicia, a Cilician princess, daughter of King Gaius Julius Alexander of Cetus. Their daughter Julius Quadratilla Bassa was married to Gaius Julius Lupus. So these people are Herods. Carax was entrusted with various official appointments at a young age. It says although it appears that he never served as a senator, the election into his class was nominally a matter of Senate itself, as mentioned in the inscription, but it is thought that he may have been prompted by Hadrian personally. As a leading citizen of Pergamon, one of the most important cities of Asia Minor, he may have met Hadrian during at least one of the emperor's 2 visits to the province in 124 AD and 129 AD. It seems equally likely that he met Antonius Pius while the future emperor was proconsul of Asia. We go to the Fab Pedigree page and we have his mother here, Julia Quadratilla Bassus, Julia of Cilicia, her father Alexander I of Cilicia, and here we go, Herod Polio. This is the line, Herod Polio, that they say Vespasian, Herod Polio, king of Chalcis, Aristobulus of Judea. So that's on his mother's side. Father's side, no background. Bassus. Do we have all these Bernice, Princess of Pergamum? So yeah, this guy is directly on his mother's side, not knowing what's on his father's side, related to the Herods. I know that your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast to my name and did not deny my faith, and even in the days when Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. But I have a few things against you. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her under her feet, and head of a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she carried out labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven, behold, a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his head. So heads, kingdoms, horns, powers, diadems, crowns, kings. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Israel is the third. The stars are Israel in Joseph's dream. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. Who did that? King Herod the Great. Now, I've traced the family of Herod to Nabatea, and I believe that the Nabateans are descendants of the Iraqi Nabateans, and I believe that they were the people of Nebu who started the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And, you know, we have this aristocracy that's been ruling over us for millennia. There's a lot of sinister things coming out of Geneva, Switzerland. And, you know, we have these Herods banished to this specific area where all of these kings of Europe come out of, the Tudors, the Plantagenets, the family of Anjou. They married into the royal family of Armenia, which I've shown in other videos about Armenia, how Salome and her Herod husband settled there, and the kings of Armenia claim the right to the throne of David. We have how the English royal family say that they're related to the throne of David and the Plantagenets, and you know, like, we've had this dragon aristocratic families ruling over us, and we are in this little season of the dragon. You know, they use the dragon in the city of London symbology. Prince Charles says he's related to Count Dracula, who started the Order of the Dragon. I mean, do these people know who they are and they're proclaiming this? I think they're Herods. And I think that these same Chaldean people and this same priesthood and this same magicians of Rome, and I think they started this Roman Catholic Church, and all of it, when you read into the prophecies of Revelation and how they chased the woman or the true church into the wilderness, and they spewed out their doctrine, and this great star of wormwood had been cast into the waters and made them bitter. So if I'm right about the beginning of Revelation, where we have the fall of Jerusalem in Judea, 70 AD, and then at the end of Revelation, at the end of time, we have the same dragon after the millennial reign of Christ, or the millennial kingdom of Christianity. We have this small time, this little season of Satan. So it says here in Revelation 20, verse 3, that the devil and Satan shall be bound for 1,000 years. So that just means that he, or it, is controlled. It's bound. It can't assert itself in power. And at the end, it's loosed a little season. Now I'm going to go to the Strong's Concordance. So the word little is mikros, the Greek, and it means small, little, least, insignificant, little or small, derived from a primary root word in Greek meaning small or little, obviously. And if we go to season, the word is chronos. So this is a really interesting word that they've used for season, because chronos is the god, the Greek god, Father Time, or Saturn. And, we know that they worship the god Saturn in Freemasonry, and the black cube is Saturn. The black cube of Islam, Mecca. I have shown via the Fan of Films channel that Mecca was originally in Petra or Nabatea. So it's Father Time and Saturn. So the little season, particularly season, it's a little time. So meaning time, a particular time, season. So probably the better translation would be little time. So this dragon is at the beginning of Revelation and the beginning of tribulation. It's at the end of Revelation and the end of tribulation on the saints. So, as I said, all of the futurist prophecies believe that it's a spiritual being, Satan, this character that's been created for us. And I'm saying, as the Bible points out, just like all of the other beasts, that this is a dynasty, a royal throne. This dragon has 7 heads, it has crowns, it has horns, all representing a dynasty and an aristocratic family. So if Revelation points to King Herod the Great being this dragon, the beginning of Revelation depicted in him trying to murder the young Messiah child as he was being born, then also this same family and the same dynastic line will be there at the end of time. And this is my logic in my obsession with the Herods, because I do believe that all of our European and global control, aristocracy, banking, Roman Catholic Church is related to these Judeans who were in control at the time of the apostles and Jesus. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.